I started doing this last year, I didn't think I'd reach out beyond a few people. But apparently, some people at Nimbly Games took notice and contacted me with a review code for their brand new game Flamebreak, which draws inspiration from League of Legends, Dota, FTL, and The Binding of Isaac.
Oh, roguelites, how you intrigue me. The genre is built around having games be replayable to the nth degree with different experiences each time, but it's something I've picked up and put down several times in the past. I quickly put down The Binding of Isaac mainly due to its controls, which apparently have been remedied in Rebirth, and I couldn't get into the gameplay of Curse of the Necrodancer. The only roguelite that I've gotten into was Rogue Legacy, but even then I ended up putting it down twice after being really into it. The supposed influence from Dota also has me a bit skeptical of how much I'll enjoy this game. I tried out League of Legends once, which is another multiplayer online battle arena, or MOBA, but unlike for countless millions of people, it failed to captivate me.
But who knows, maybe Flamebreak will combine elements of these genres that'll tickle my fancy. So, thank you to Eric Measure from Nimbly Games for providing me with a review code. Now let's take a look at Flamebreak.
When you start up the game, you're treated to a poem that lays out the lore of this game's world. The world was created by Pyrrhion the Wise, however he's unable to create life and wanders until he reaches the Flames of Worldfire Peak, from which he created the Phoenix, which had a bit of Pyrrhion himself inside of it. Before too long, dwarves, elves, and men came to be. Man was far weaker than the other races, and so Pyrrhion created the demigods to keep them safe. There was Proctus, Lord of Wars, Halloran of Health, Sepicles of Speed, Ferrari, God of Rage, and Necrus, Lord of Death. The demigods didn't take too kindly to how the mortals praised Pyrrhion over them and betrayed him, plunging the world into chaos. The Phoenix rose from its slumber, containing a piece of Pyrrhion and... main menu. Although it feels a bit heavy-handed and spoon-fed, the presentation of the backstory is incredibly well handled and the art is gorgeous. As for the backstory itself, it's serviceable, but there's not much else to it. At first, you can only choose between playing as a human, an elf, or a dwarf, each one with their own skills and stats to set each other apart. The elf is more based on ranged and special attacks and is a tiny bit squishy, the dwarf is more up close and personal and can take a few hits, and the human is right in between the two. Personally, I went for the elf. You start off with 4 attacks, 1 basic and 3 specials which have cooldown times for whenever you use them. You aim your attacks using your mouse, which is a bit jarring at first for me, but I quickly got the hang of it. A run of the game is broken up into stages, each with a different environment. You essentially have to navigate forward to the boss at the top of the map, which is structured in sort of a grid style. There are battles, mini-bosses, towns where you can stock up on supplies, mage tents where you can upgrade your abilities, you can buy new abilities, you can buy armor at blacksmiths, the standard fare. One of the more interesting locations you can go to is a temple of a demigod, where you're given the choice of clearing the temple of enemies to gain favor with that temple's deity, or destroying the temple statue as well as kill the enemies to gain favor with the other demigods. If you earn enough favor with a particular demigod, they'll grant you a passive ability for being loyal. In combat, you're typically up against a group of enemies who will try to gang up on you, but your special abilities will keep them at bay and thin the herd. Sometimes there are combat sequences where there will be arena traps or several invincible enemies defending one single mook, and these variations in combat arenas combined with the grace period you get before a battle starts keep you on your toes as well as keep you moving. Standing still is essentially asking for death. Don't do it. If you lollygag or take too many detours while trying to get to the boss at the end of a stage, the map will be consumed in darkness, which renders any unvisited spaces into darkness spaces where you fight tough foes with no reward. Once you defeat a boss, you'll gain Spirit, which is essentially experience points. Gain enough, and you level up, which can grant you unlocks such as new characters. If you die, however, you have to start all over from the beginning with all of the equipment you've procured being lost to the void, the only remaining element from your previous adventure being your Spirit. The structure and core gameplay of Flamebreak is solid and is something that I can see potentially being highly addicting. I say potentially because I found myself starting and stopping somewhat frequently, although that doesn't mean I think that the game is bad, it's just the genre. I'm not really one for roguelites, and I think that this game sort of finally showed that to me. They're made to be incredibly repetitive and somewhat difficult. Not that difficulty is a bad thing, or that repetition is a bad thing for this genre. It's what the genre is built on. But it's just not for me.
I understand that roguelites are meant to be played over and over again, and that each time, the layout of the levels and the structure are different. And Flamebreak does that pretty damn well, as it should. but that's something that I personally don't like about the genre, and I'm sorry, Flamebreak hasn't sold me on that, but that's just me.
Visually, Flamebreak is flowing with color and has a crisp, charming, cartoonish art style that I feel blends very well with the gameplay. It seems to take some cues from The Binding of Isaac, but for some reason I'm sort of reminded of Dungeon Defenders. The sound, though, is just sort of alright. None of the music really stuck out to me, the sound effects are just sort of okay and fitting, and there's not really much else I can say beyond that. It's there, it works, but there's nothing really notable.
If you're a fan of roguelites, especially The Binding of Isaac, I'd wholeheartedly recommend Flamebreak to you. It doesn't have the greatest story, and the presentation is just above average to me, but it's still pretty darn solid with the gameplay. However, it could really benefit from some sort of co-op mode, with the difficulty maybe raised a little bit to compensate for having 2 players, but as it is now, it's a completely single-player experience, and that's probably the case for most roguelites. I wouldn't know, I haven't explored that deeply into the genre. The game's official launch was on March 15th, and you can buy it on Steam for $10. And again, if you like roguelites, I recommend at least checking it out. Thank you to Eric Measure and the good folks at Nimbly Games for providing me with a review code of the game, and I hope to see what you guys will come up with in the future. But until then, have a good night guys, and happy gaming.